Here on The Colour of Country Life, we're speaking with the Chief of Staff at the State Emergency Service, Derren Halleday. How are you, Derren?
Fantastic. Thanks, Ricky. And yourself?
Great, thank you. We know some of your interstate colleagues have got a fair bit on their hands, but here in South Australia, thankfully not yet a challenge, but the SES is doing its level best to get ready for a high river in the Murray Channel.
That's absolutely correct. As we know, the River Murray's a bit of a slow flow, and we do get a bit of anticipation as things come down. Needless to say, we are already seeing some low-lying shack areas that are receiving some inundation at this time, but it is really at the moment planning for how the different flow levels as they come down the river affect different communities on the way down.
Yeah, we're seeing some phenomenal figures when it comes to sandbagging, interstate that is, but there's already some sandbags and sand being sent up to some of the river communities by the SES.
Indeed. They're en route today, up to multiple locations, and I'd direct people to our website on where to pick up those sandbags and where to participate in the community sandbagging days. We're doing that at Blanchetown on Saturday between 12 and 5, and on Sunday between 9 and 2, and then we're also doing a community day of sandbagging up at Morgan on Saturday between 12 and 5, and Sunday between 9 and 2. So really inviting the community and shack owners and such like to come and work with getting some preparedness underway.
Yeah, we'll share that information with our listeners across the weekend. And the value of those, I imagine, is, among other things, is to help people pack a sandbag correctly so it's effective.
It is indeed. So at those sandbag filling locations, one, you'll be able to get the bags and the sand, but most importantly, you'll get some direction and some usually a little bit of literature up there on the right way to lay them, the amount that goes in the sandbag, how to fold them over, how to put them down in a stretcher bond type pattern so as it provides greater strength, and really where to focus on your dwelling, and usually that's in around the doorways and in and around the vents and such like to get the maximum efficiency of the number of bags available.
All right, and I imagine that, as I understand it from the language we use here, below Cadell it's described at the moment as minor flood, but it's simply a high flow upstream of that, is that correct? Yeah,
that's correct. And so until we get to the 100 gigalitres a day, that will be the wording that we use. Once it gets over the 100 gigalitres a day, over the upcoming weeks, you'll find that minor flood level will be sort of extended to the whole of the channel. And some of the wording will change in regard to that. And then again, if it does get higher again, it goes up into a moderate flood level post 1:30.
Post 1:30. I noticed that I think you've indicated that around December you're expecting around the 120 on the latest projections. Is that right?
Yeah, that's very much what's being out through the Department of Environment and Water website, and certainly as discussed with the Premier and Minister a couple of days ago, that's where they're looking at the moment, and that's based on current in-water flows, but again, current rain, upcoming rain and such like in the other states will have a varied effect on that, as will the catchments across the whole Murray-Darling Basin.
When I did a bit of looking into this on the internet, there were some pretty detailed maps of what minor and moderate flood levels look like. In general terms for the community, if there was a moderate flood, what extra steps might need to be taken at that stage?
It is really in regard to the preparedness. So I'd encourage people to go to the Department of Environment and Water website. There's really quite a very good search tool down to property levels on what it may mean for them at different flow rates. So instead of sort of doing generalist statements, I'd ask people to actually go and have a look at that mapping on there and work out what it means for them, particularly at those levels up to and around the 120, just to see what prevention and preparedness activities they may wish to consider themselves. But then obviously for contingency planning for themselves, the what ifs, if it does get higher than that, what might they need to do? Will they be affected? Won't they be affected? We've always been very much about being able to take some preparedness action earlier, and there's I won't say the good part of this event, but the advantage is that we have time on our side at the moment, and we do have the opportunity for individuals, shack owners who may or may not live in those areas and other parts of community to consider their risk and what they want to do with their properties, their belongings in those properties, whether it may be a case of moving those higher within the property, a case of, depending on the situation and their individual risk, whether they may wish to remove some of those belongings to a different location whilst this event unfolds. It is really down to being educated and working out what it may mean for themselves and what we can do as a community more broadly and how the agency can help support that.
Now, just lastly, we are talking about riverine flooding here, but there can sometimes be flash flooding. When we hear bulletins from Interstate, the emergency services are saying there, don't drive through floodwaters. I'm sure that's the same message for people all over South Australia as well.
Very much so, and our messages remain unchanged for that. With floodwater generally, you don't know what's underneath the water, and particularly in and around the Murray, it's often dirty water, and floodwater can deteriorate land underneath it very, very quickly. It may appear to be all nice and flat, but driving through that can cause significant issues. Certainly having kids playing in it is, it just can't happen. Parents need to supervise children in and around the river, in and around any floodwater as it comes down. And we also need to be aware that as the floodwater comes down, it will be mixing with everything that comes down with it, and so it'll have a lot of organic matter and such like that is picked up through the forest areas before it enters South Australia. But as we know, it's as it goes through some of these habitable areas that we're in, and what people may or may not have stored in those areas, we encourage people not to enter floodwater during that time.
Well, important community information. Derren Halleday from the SES, thanks very much for joining us today.
Thank you, and stay prepared and appreciate the time.